Welcome to the EntrePastors Podcast on YouTube. This is a show that helps pastors think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs. Well, hello there, and welcome to the EntrePastors Podcast on YouTube. Hey, I'm John Sanders. I am one of the co-hosts of the EntrePastors Podcast, and I'm thrilled to have you joining us for this week's episode. You're going to hear a conversation that myself and my co-host Les Hughes had recently with our friend Danny Holwerda. Now, Danny is a church planter, but he is not your typical pastor, and here's what I mean when I say that. I mean it in the best way possible. He is choosing on purpose not to be 100% financially dependent upon the church that he is serving. On purpose, he's going out into the marketplace and leaning into several different entrepreneurial opportunities that are creating the revenue and the income that he needs to not only support his family, but to build wealth and to thrive and to be in a position to be generous to missions work and to God's kingdom as he sees fit. Therefore, he is absolutely one of our people. He is the epitome of an EntrePastor. It's stories like this that we love to celebrate at EntrePastors, and I'm thrilled to share this conversation with you. So, thanks for tuning in. Sit back and enjoy this conversation we had with our friend Danny Holwerda. Here we go. Check it out. Well, Danny, it is my pleasure to welcome you to the EntrePastors Podcast, man. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me. You know, this wasn't a part of the initial plan, but when you extended the invitation, I was just like, yeah, I'm here. Let's do it.
You're doing good. The answer is always yes.
Yes, yep. Right? Any type of promotion you can get, take it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, you know, you and I connected recently, I think through social media. We jumped on a call together, and man, as I'm hearing your story, it's stories exactly like yours that we love to share and celebrate because you are an EntrePastor. And so I want to get into your story and kind of pick your brain about some of the things you're doing. You said something that was really awesome when we were on the call a few weeks ago with me, and I'm going to ask you to say that again. You probably don't remember what it is, but we'll get to it in your story. Okay. So if you say it, then I'll go, there it is. You just said it.
I'm surprised to find out what it is.
Yeah, it's good stuff. I can't wait to share your story. So Danny, why don't we just jump in and give us kind of the 30,000 foot overview, picture of your life as it pertains to, being in pastoral ministry. And then we'll get into some of the business stuff as well.
Sure. Let's see. Let's do some tidbit stuff. Grew up in the church, Assemblies of God, Church of God in Christ background. So Pentecostal background. Both my parents are 20 plus year veterans. So military kid. And, just being in the church was just part of having community. It's just part of being there, and serving was always something that was pressed. Is you serve in the church. You're a part of the church. You serve in the church in some way. And then eventually got into lay ministry, working with Royal Rangers and working with youth, so really focusing on that men's ministry, children's ministry was where that is. And in terms of formal pastoral ministry and getting into that, Doug Marsh, who was the national director of Royal Rangers at the time, put a call out to all his lay ministers and said, hey, we've made this deal with Global University to do the Berean courses. I want you guys, if you are called to teach and mentor kids, I would like you to get more of an education. If you're truly called to do that, let's be more up to speed on Bible theology and processes and be a bigger support for our pastors. And our team at the time said, this is what we're going to do. Three of us are committed to doing this. Are you committed to coming along? I was about 18 at the time and said, all right, I'll back your play. I'm coming with you. And we did one course every 6 months. And that's how the education piece started, and it was an interesting journey. And then eventually the opportunity to be in an unlicensed, licensed capacity opened up, and it wasn't paid at all. It was a pay to play role, but we want you on leadership with the church. And by then I had enough education where they're like, okay, we're going to treat this kind of like an internship type thing, apprenticing type thing. You're going to get some more experience. And then the call to jump into youth ministry came, and I was a youth pastor for 3 years. No salary for that or pay for that either. That was bivocational pay to play. And then became a church planner, and they presented that. And right when that came up, I had just enough educational background to actually be like a lead pastor, like to actually qualify for all of that. And if I had slacked for a year and not done stuff, I wouldn't have been able to qualify. So that really just kind of is my journey of just being someone that's willing to help, not really caring so much about the money side of the ministry and just being willing.
So did you grow up, desiring to be in some kind of vocational ministry, or did you
Nope.
just sort of stumble into it with the next step as each next step became clear, you found God leading you down that path?
And pastoring was not on my radar. My goal was to join the Army. I had an Army scholarship. Like that was my whole goal. And it wasn't, it was for a medical injury that I didn't go down that path. And that changed my whole direction on things. But vocational ministry was never something that looked appetizing to me at all. It just happened through calling.
So I'm hearing also in your story something that many in our audience will relate to, and that's that, I'm willing to serve, happy to be a part of it. And the money thing, we'll just kind of figure that out later. That's not, I rarely hear from anybody who says, I wanted to just make tons of money in life, so I decided to go into pastoral ministry. And I also didn't hear that in your story. But as you and I were talking recently, I mean, you are our people. Like you kind of get us, you kind of get the message that we're putting out into the world. So I want to explore that story a little bit. How did you kind of come out of that very normal, or come through that normal process of like, hey, you get to serve the Lord and you get to figure out how to fund it as well, because there's no money really to pay you to do this. And now you're in a place of doing this full time as a church planter. Like, I want to hear some of that journey from the money side of it. Like, because right now today, that's not, you're not paying to play, so to speak. I mean, you're building stuff out in the marketplace, but you're not operating in that place of just complete scarcity. Like we see many pastors who never really broke out of that mindset or that tradition of just kind of being broke in pastoral ministry. So tell us a little bit of that story.
Yeah. I mean, I've had my famine seasons where money was tight and you've got to hold on and pray and just trust. And a check shows up in the mail by someone and you're like, wow, okay, thank God we can pay the bill. We can buy groceries. But my parents, they instilled a very hard work ethic in all of their children, right? Like if you're broke, that's a you problem, that's a you issue, right? There's something in your algorithm that you're not doing right. You're not budgeting right. You're not logging enough hours. You're not in the right place. So you need to get on your knees, pray, and then get to work. And so through this pay to play journey, as it was all dialed down to one is schedule. What do I actually have to do in the role that God's called me to do? And identifying that and isolating that, right? So as youth pastor, Wednesday night, that's a must. I have to be there for Wednesday night youth ministry. Okay. I've got to connect with my parents. Okay. So when can I do that? Once I isolate that, the rest of that time is your time. And so you find a job or you work in a role that becomes flexible to what you're called to do. And so when I lost the path to being in the military, I was really, really depressed for a year. A year was really hard. But then, and through prayer and fasting and just listening, we go, you know what? They don't want me to serve my country. That's not an option right now. Then I'm going to serve my community. And I got into CNA work, and that allowed me to do graveyard shifts. So there's no ministry usually going on after 10 o'clock, unless it's a real emergency. And the lower on the pastoral totem pole you are, the less likely you are to get called after hours, right? Usually they call the associate or the lead pastor. So I worked graveyard shift, slept during the day, and then did my ministry stuff as I needed to. And, that's how we got by. And then eventually we're like, you know what, we've got another 4 hours in the day where we're not sleeping, we're not working. Let's get a side job and let's continue to try to just put money away and survive and achieve our goals. And so I've been married about 12 years, 12 years now. It's been a while. And our goal when we first came on was within our first year, we're going to be homeowners. That's what me and my wife decided. We were already snowballing stuff. We said, you know what, we're not going to waste our money renting. And within 10 months, we had our home that's now a rental property now. And so it's just being wise with your assets and your time, I think.
Yeah. You said something, there was kind of something interesting in your story, as you moved into church planting, as that's the role that you're in as a now lead pastor, your church planting 6 years in, correct, into your journey as a
Yeah,
church
we just
planter?
celebrated officially 5 years, but it'll
Okay,
be in 3 months will be 6 years when we got keys to the property and we're really like, okay, what do we got here?
cool. Very cool. So you had a detail in your story as you were transitioning into that. Your denomination gives you the option of full-time support for a year or
Mm.
a different alternative. Tell that story because I found that to be pretty interesting.
Yeah, our church plant was part revitalization, part church plant, right? We came in for a ministry that had been around for 70 years and closed down. So there was some seed money there already on top of our crowdfunding. And the option was, you know what, well, we could pay you about 36 to 40-ish for the first year. We'll take that out of the seed money budget, which for me, that was like, well, that's 50%,
Mm.
right? That's 50%. So that means the next year we've got a lot less to play with than the year after we have a lot less to play with. And so, I talked with my team, I talked with my coaches and said, I don't feel that's what God's calling me to do. If I can have the flexibility to stay in the workplace, continue doing my job. At that time, I was a residential manager for a company called Development Homes. And so I had some flexibility when I was on call. As long as my clients' needs were being met, there's some flexibility there. And so we made an agreement I'm going to give full-time pastor effort for minimal cost on that. I get 600 a month. That's what I get. But before that, I think it was 5 is what I was doing. And just let me work my bivocational. And if it becomes a conflict of interest, then we'll readdress whether this is a problem or not. And we ended up getting half of our congregation from being in the workplace. Like that was really huge.
Yeah, so let's dive into that a little bit. And by the way, where in the world are you? Where is your church located?
So my church plant is in Crookston, Minnesota. I grew up here in Grand Forks, so I'm on break right now at the gym. So, I'm in Grand Forks in my office here in Grand Forks.
Okay. And when you say the gym, tell us about that. What gym are you speaking of?
Oh yeah. So I'm lead pastor of Nexus Church, and then the gym that I operate a gym in Anytime Fitness for a franchisee. So I'm not the owner. I just operate this facility for them right now. And so I still work a 40 hours covering the gym, doing that along the other stuff that we're going to talk about, where we do some other side stuff, right?
Yeah.
And
what was it you said to me? This is the part that really, as soon as you said it, I was like, man, we got to have you on the show. You mentioned, you were talking about the impact you can have in, the ministry that you have in the gym. You know what I'm talking about? Say it. Say the thing.
Talking about the numbers game, man, that battle with when you've only got 20, 30 people in your congregation and you're feeling like you're not really making a big impact or reaching a lot of people. But when you switch your mentality to how many people you're exposed to in a whole day, in a whole year, this gym has about 950 members. And so my HQ might be Nexus Church with 25 to 30 people, but my pastoral calling, my congregation is well over 1,000 because I'm the only pastor that these guys ever get to see.
And there it is. I just want people to sit in that for a minute because the way it rolled off the tongue to me when we were talking the other day and you were like, yeah, I have 950 members, and just so casually. And it's like, it kind of stopped me in my tracks. Like, that's an incredible way to think about it. Obviously you're not serving communion and preaching sermons in the gym. It's not that type of membership, but it's ministry nonetheless. It is, you are the pastor that those folks see and know and relate to. And you're available in their life. And it's just a really cool way. See, because at EntrePastors, we are often saying that business is ministry, and being out in the marketplace is a valid form of carrying out the calling that God has upon your life. And so, man, I just love that you're celebrating that, because I think in ministry, sometimes pastors that are, have to work bivocational or whatever, feel this sense of discouragement or shame, or maybe there's a stigma about it of like, man, I just can't make it as a quote unquote real pastor and where I'm fully supported. And you kind of had that option. At least, you had the wisdom to look ahead and go, man, that money's going to run out probably pretty quickly. And it's not that much money to begin with. And so you chose a better option of give me the freedom to pastor and to be in the marketplace. And I just applaud that, because I think there's a good number of pastors that maybe would have said, give me the sure thing. I'll take the 36K and then we'll just have faith. And again, not that it's wrong, but it leads to that place of pastoral poverty that we talk about so often, where a pastor's just stuck and feeling very broke in the thing that they're doing. So again, I applaud your story, man, of being out in the marketplace.
It's all God's glory on that decision, right? I took 3 days of prayer and fasting, locked myself in the church, and really prayed about decisions, right? So there's all the spiritual stuff was done before I made that decision. It wasn't let's sit down and nope, I'm just going to do this. I think this is smarter. I'd love to claim all the wisdom for it, but I just really felt the Holy Spirit saying, that's not what I've called for you. And you know what? In 11 months, COVID hit. And my congregation was forever changed. We were down to about 9 people. And so if we had done that, I would have been the biggest bill on the church payroll when our tithes and attendance and everything was going down, and the whole 2 years of recovery would have been completely shot. We probably would have lost the ministry if I had done that, So it's God's glory that I got to give for that.
Yeah. So I heard you mention in passing that you have a rental property. So, so that's another source of income. You're working at the gym, and we don't have to go into any deep details here, but you had mentioned to me just some other dreams that you have about, like, I could just tell you're an entrepreneur, man. You're going to be in this space. So anything more that you want to say in terms of future entrepreneurial ideas or thoughts or plans that you have in mind at the moment?
Well, sure. And I mean, we can dig as deep into this as you want. I'm pretty transparent on stuff, right? So my calling is pastoral ministry, and I get about 600 from that. 200 of that we put back into the church plant, into missions every month. That's just what we do as faithful. We tithe on all of our revenue sources. So the rental property, we tithe on the revenue, my paycheck from this gym, we tithe on that. And then we have as well, I do floor cleaning on the side. So I'm in the process of purchasing a floor cleaning business from a gentleman who's getting ready to retire. And so I'll be bringing on his 2 employees under my LLC. I've got 2 guys that I'm going to be bringing on there. Then I've got a book that's out as well. And so I get some revenue from that. We tithe on everything, right? If you're consistent in yourself, you're consistent tithing, doors just kind of open. And I do the officiating stuff as well, trying to really learn from you guys on how things that I'm already doing, we can be of better service to as well.
You're talking about like wedding officiating, funeral service,
funerals
sort of
and stuff.
Yeah.
And I just want to work smarter, not harder, right? I'm not looking to be busy. I'm looking to be someone that can back other people's ministries, right? I don't need a lot to survive. I only need about 40,000 a year for my family to be okay. But God's kingdom needs so much more God-willing people that are willing to say, you know what, I can help back these 12 missionaries because I've got the funds to do so.
Yeah.
That's where my dream is.
Well, you got a pretty good stack going. It sounds like. I mean, I can see why your first conversation with John led to him wanting to book you on the podcast, because you're our dude.
Okay.
Wow. I really, man, it's just so awesome to hear how you've been faithful with a little starting out, and now the Lord's trusting you with more. Seemed like I heard that somewhere.
Yeah, I think there's a book that talks about
there's
that,
something out there
where the give a guy 10 coins and see what they do with it, and
I want to dive in. First of all, I want to don't let me forget to talk about your book. So we'll go there and have you share a little bit of that. But back up just a minute. You mentioned, and that's the part I didn't know if you wanted to say much on air about, but you mentioned, purchasing a floor cleaning business, and a little bit of a backstory for our community listening. Les and I have not talked much out loud on the podcast about this. From the beginning of EntrePastors, we've been very much about starting businesses and helping pastors launch businesses, and we will continue to do that because we believe in that and see a lot of value in that. Recently, though, Les and I both have really been having our eyes open to a whole new arena of entrepreneurship, and that is acquiring businesses. Instead of going through all the slog of starting a business, you come along and buy a business that's already proven and profitable. And you are getting that opportunity right now to buy a relatively small floor cleaning business, but it's established, it's profitable. You see opportunity there to increase the productivity and the profitability of that. So maybe tell us as much of that story as you feel like saying, because I think that's an area we've not explored a lot, we as EntrePastors with our community. And we'll be talking more about that in the days to come. I've got some guests we're working on getting lined up to really that are experts in that space of acquiring businesses. But you're kind of the first guy that we're broaching this subject with,
Okay.
to the best of my knowledge. So tell us a little bit about that. What does that look like to buy a business
Wow.
versus starting one?
Oh, well, I'm honored, and I mean, I'm very happy in my seat as pastor and running this gym, right? So I'm not looking to get out of the seat, and it's just something that came up in conversation, how we connect with people and you hear the burdens of people's heart, and the opportunity came up talking with this gentleman where he's like, you know what, I'm looking to retire within this year. I've been running this business since 1981, and I'm tired. I'm ready to enjoy the fruits of my labor. And I was not interested in floor cleaning. That was not something that I found remotely fun for me at all. So I said, well, I'll try a couple jobs, right? And then you sign a non-disclosure, you get to look at the books, you start to take inventory, and the conversation of, is this possible, becomes, okay, this is business. We have to get a lawyer involved. We've got to get LLCs, start passing insurance, become assigned insured, and talking money, and he threw out the offer, right? This was all, I didn't throw out any numbers. I didn't know really how to assess the business, so I had to learn. And part of that, I want to touch on is know your network, man. This floor cleaning one, I had a buddy that owns a floor cleaning business here in Grand Forks, and this other one isn't a rival. They do things that he doesn't do. So he's like, I use knowledge that was around. And it's a process of, you got to have some money to put down. You don't need nearly as much as starting, depending on where you're going, but man, I don't know how much numbers I want to go into on the
That's
air till
fine.
everything's signed, but
Yeah, you don't
it's a
have to
different
go.
beast.
You don't have to go deep into the numbers, but a couple of things that I want our audience to hear there is, first of all, here's a theme. You don't necessarily have to be an expert in the thing to run, to own a business that does the thing. Now, you're going to need a team, in which case you already have built into this purchase. You've got employees that know what they're doing, and the current owner, as I recall, is going to plan on sticking around and still operating some things for you in the transitional process there. So
About
I
a
just
year and
want,
a half, about a year and
yeah,
a half, 2 years, he's going to stay on because he wants to keep busy. And he's got a guy who's been doing floors since he was 16, and another guy that's been doing it for 30 years. And they gave me hugs, man. They're like, oh, dude, Pastor Dan from Crookston's buying this. Let's go. And I'm like, okay, my
That's
reputation
good, man.
precedes me.
That's
that's
awesome.
cool, man. And again, like, this is what I want pastors to hear, that I often say pastors have an unfair advantage in the marketplace. They don't know it much of the time, but they do. And this is an example of that. Pastors, if they've been doing a decent job in leading and delegating in the church side of things, they've got the people skills. They have the ability to lead others and to delegate and to equip and train and raise up. And so it's like, you don't necessarily have to be skilled or even passionate about, cleaning floors, or refinishing floors. But if you have the business and you have a team that can do it, you can run that business and you can own and operate that. And it's an asset where people are out. You're not only serving them by creating that job for them, they're also serving you by creating income that you would not have otherwise. And you get it all the while you're doing all your other things in life, your ministry things, your other entrepreneurial things. So I just want people to hear the possibility of business ownership versus just being the guy out doing all the work.
Well, I think a lot of people in our circles, definitely different paths that we talk to, discount the value of being able to be approachable to people, right? Being sensitive to the Holy Spirit and being sensitive to people's hearts, because that's an area that a lot of business owners, when you sit in on BSI meetings, they struggle with the empathetic side, being able to connect with people, being able to navigate the emotions of what's going on. And when you switch into a workplace field, you might be really surprised that you're actually not cutthroat, but you're pretty well equipped to navigate things that other people takes them 2-3 weeks to try to figure out. And it's just normal church stuff for us.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Hey, tell me, out of curiosity, when you had that initial conversation with this business owner where he tells you, man, I think I'm getting ready to get out of this thing, where did that conversation take place, just out of curiosity?
I don't think I told you on that one. I was going for a walk in my community with my dog.
Okay.
That's where it was. And he drove up in his van and he stopped and said, hey, Pastor, how you doing? And it was just one of those quick neighborhood talks where you're sitting there for 15, 20 minutes, just chatting, catching up. And then that's when it came up. And that's when the initial buzz was in. And then we saw each other again. And then eventually it was like, you know what, let's have lunch. I'd like to at least hear a little bit more because you've brought it up twice. Let's figure it out.
Man, that's a bummer. I was hoping you were going to say it happened in your gym, because then I was going to be like, see,
Oh,
that never would have happened if you were sitting in
It'd
your
been too
church
good.
office. We're going to back up and
Yeah.
we'll
I've
have you say
I've
it
had
again.
offers here at the gym, and some of them, if you don't have a good business head, you'd get sucked into it pretty quick and think
Mhm.
it's a good
I
thing.
bet.
A lot of people that have money don't always know the road that it takes to get to you're sitting in a finished product. And so I've turned
So
down a
did,
lot of interesting ideas.
that one, was it as explicit as him saying, I'm getting ready to take take the off ramp here, would you be interested? Or was it just more of a personal conversation, and in that you could tell that he was getting ready to hang it up, but you said, have you ever thought about, like, which one really initiated the that part of the conversation?
I have to say it was the first one. It was more of a, pastor, if you hear of anyone that's interested or looking for
Okay.
something, reach out. And I walked away from that conversation not thinking I'm the guy that's interested. It wasn't
Mm-hmm.
until the second and third natural touch
That's
point.
probably good. That's probably a good thing.
Yep. Yep. So, I mean, you can do well if you're a hunter, and you're looking for businesses to buy and you've got that
Yeah.
shark mentality, like that will work too. But my journey is not that. It's just doing what I'm
Yeah.
called to do
There you go.
and being willing to listen and try, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reverse is always an option. You can always say, you know what, I'm not interested in this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But
That's
see,
what
there
the due diligence
again,
for.
you are an entrepreneur, and that's what entrepreneurs do. We can't help it. We see opportunities everywhere. Opportunities constantly approach
Yep.
us, and it can be a problem too. I mean, we can always say yes to things and chase the next shiny object, but I would say more than not, it's a strength, because we see opportunities where other people are tempted to just shy away and go, oh, he's asking about someone else, not me.
When I'm constantly, there's so many things that us as pastors have to be receptive to, but when my philosophy of who I'm supposed to be in a pastor is, I need to be sensitive to what God's calling is on my life. And the main things I need to do as the lead pastor. After that, he's gifted me with these other abilities that I want to make sure that I utilize, and how I keep that mantra going, where it's like, okay, I have to check my heart. Am I doing this for greed, or am I doing this for God's kingdom? And Paul really is our big example when he's talking to the church in Thessalonica, saying, remember, brothers, our labor and toil, we worked night and day that we might not burden to any of you while we proclaimed the gospel. And that he still continues about, when we were given bread, we paid for it, right? We have these examples from our biblical founders that say, don't be a burden to the church, right?
Yeah.
We shouldn't be the biggest bill. And so that's where that fuel for being an entrepreneur, for wanting to grow businesses and continue to do what I'm called to do, comes from. It's like, I don't want to be a burden to the people I'm supposed to be loving and serving.
Yeah. And this isn't so much a question, it's more of just a statement and thinking out loud about it. But I would contend much of the time, the community at large, when they think about going to relationships in the community to sell business or to do business or to engage in those transactions, generally speaking, pastors are probably not anywhere on their radar as a part of that conversation. And my dream, if there is one, would be to see the day where some of that changes, where pastors more and more are viewed as players in the community, in that regard, of people who have an understanding and a pulse on the marketplace and how it functions and who the players are. I just think it puts you right in the middle of the very hub of activity where the people are and where people are navigating every single day, as opposed to just sitting inside the four walls of a church where you're largely removed from the marketplace. So I'm excited when I hear stories of pastors who are having those conversations in the community, and community begins to see pastors as a viable source of like knowledge and execution in the marketplace. So anyway, not really a question, more just a statement there.
No, it matters, right? And we are kind of a hidden gem, and there can be some skepticism on whether or not we're the right fit in the marketplace or not. Even my role here at the gym, it was confessed to me 2 years ago that they were actually hesitant to hire me because I was a pastor, because we get so spiritual about stuff. Oh, excuse me. They are worried that I might be like, oh, the Lord said I needed to go here 6 months later and be gone.
Yeah.
And now here I am 4 years later, still sitting in the seat.
Danny, I've had that in almost every community engagement that I've had as a pastor. Like, for instance, when I came into the full-time fire service, the guys, my reputation preceded me. Everyone knew I was a pastor. There was already a buzz and a skepticism, and you almost have to overcome that. And I've had that at every arena where I've stepped into something. That there's just something about the whole pastoral thing. I don't know that we're going to change that or that it's a good or bad thing, but I guess it does speak to the fact that our culture as a whole regards pastors as altogether different and set apart. And again, maybe in some ways for good reasons, and certainly in others, maybe for not so good reasons. And I just like it when pastors can be a part of the community and a part of the conversation, and people see that they bring more to the table than just theology.
Well, you just be consistently yourself. You're always going to be a pastor, even when everyone says, "Hey, you're not in this scenario." You're always going to be Pastor John. You're always going to be Pastor Les. Always going to be Pastor Dan. Just be consistent with what God called you to do, right?
Yeah.
And just try, right?
Yeah. Well, hey, tell me quickly about your book. We love celebrating authors here. We actually have EntrePastors Press. We help people get published, and so we celebrate stories of authorship. So tell us a little bit about the book. When did you write it? What's it about? Tell us that story.
Yeah. So the book is titled "The Black and White: Overcoming Sexual Temptation." And that is my journey. I'm not an alcoholic guy. I'm not a drug abuse guy or anything like that. But sexual temptation, that was my big thing. And it's still a constant battle that I have to check myself on every single day. And I just woke up with this fuel from the Holy Spirit saying, I want you to write this. And it was really a season where my entrepreneurial push started to come through more and more, because there was people in my life that I won't name, but they're 20, 30 years my senior, saying, the Lord's been telling me to write these books. And then I go, I've been feeling that same thing. And they'd go, young man, you're way too young. You don't have enough experience. You don't know, you can't do this, yada, yada. And I just went, you know what? The Holy Spirit says this is what I got to do. So I'm going to listen to what God says do, not what you say do. And, it ended up being an area where, as much as I love some of the ministries of our church, they don't touch on sexual addiction or how to combat this problem, right? And it makes it's a taboo that lives in the thread of the church, that we say, well, don't do it, but we know that everyone's doing it.
Yeah.
And so I just felt like, you know what, I need to be set free from this. I need to be obedient from this. So I just wrote my story down of what it was like growing up in the church when I started to feel this sexual awakening, how I tried to rationalize it and understand it, and then the steps that I used to minimize that risk, right? That urge to just want to be doing things in sin. And so that's kind of what the story is about. It talks about prayer and fasting. It gives biblical examples. It has different prayers that if you're awkward when you pray, well, then pray some of these and start to get that rhythm of prayer life built up so that you can begin to overcome this. And, there's some theology with it. I don't take the just be done cold turkey approach on it. That's great, but most times people fail. This is more of a runner's marathon type path to getting out of sexual temptation. Is start slow, do this, set goals, set pacing, and then all of a sudden a year's gone by and you haven't looked at that stuff.
Yeah. How long ago was it that you released the book?
I think 6 years ago. It was right around the time 2019 September. So it was actually, we had just gotten keys to the church a month ago. So we were in the middle of church planting launch prep when I was doing my editing. And so it would have been, I think I started writing it in 2018 timeframe. So it took about a year for me to get it. And it's not a big book. It's a small book.
Yeah. What have you noticed, maybe a couple stories of just the impact of a book? I think that's where I want to go with the question, is because again, we encourage people often to put the book that we believe God has probably put in their heart. They feel inspired and called to write a book. And so once you finally get that out into the world, how have you seen God move through your vulnerability, you sharing your story, you being willing to, it's a vulnerable thing to write a book and to put it out there, especially on a subject like this. But, how have you seen God move in people's lives as a result of your obedience to write the book?
Marriage is really kind of one of the bigger ones that I see with a book that talks about sexual temptation. It's not something that people are ready to raise high and say, hey, I got this book.
Yeah.
So most of my experiences are, hey, Pastor, I'd love to talk to you. And then they go, hey, I saw your book. I got it. I read it. This really helped me. Would you give me advice about this? And it's really about reorchestrating what God's design is for us as men, as marriage partners, that, sex isn't something icky, so save it for Jesus, right? Like that doesn't make any sense. Sex is bad, so save it for Jesus. That doesn't make any sense, but that's what the church says a lot of time. Save it till you're married. Sex is horrible. No, sex is an absolutely great thing that's designed by God, but it needs to be orchestrated and fueled in the right way. And so a lot of that is, this allowed me and my spouse to be on the same page, for me to open up, because it talks about confessing. And that's really, I think, the biggest change is that fear of keeping that secret box. Learning that you can write down your secret box and the world's not going to explode. You're not going to burst on fire. You can confess all the things, and you're going to be more free than you ever were with your spouse, with your work, with your subordinates, So like, it's a lot easier to talk about addiction and sexual temptation with people when you can go, listen, all my stuff's in a book, man. Like you could go buy it for $8 and see all my skeletons.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that story, and we'll put a link to your book in the show notes of this episode. I have a couple more quick questions as we're wrapping things up. What advice or encouragement, if you knew right now that there's pastors listening to this who are just frustrated, they're stuck in that place of what we're calling pastoral poverty. They've been broke and feeling that tension for a long time. They consistently hear us share stories on here of pastors who are finding and creating better ways, more sustainable ways, more life-giving ways of ministry. If you had a chance to just encourage that pastor and speak into their life, what would you say to them?
The very first thing I'd say is breathe, pastor. Breathe. God loves you, and you're doing exactly what you need to do. You're right where you need to be, and you're not too far behind. It is not too late, whether you're 50, 30, 70. Let's take a break here and take a breath. Next thing, open up your budget and be honest with it. Stop buying dumb stuff, right? So many pastors are buying coffee, buying $20 in fast food, and doing that. That's a waste on the resources that God has given you. You need to open up your budget and get a control on your funnel. The funnel is the stuff that's wasteful.
That's the
Right?
most un-American thing that's ever been said on this podcast, but keep going. You're telling people to stop buying
It's
stuff.
the truth, man.
You're right.
You can be rich and make $50,000 a year if your budget's under control. You don't need a 6-figure budget to be rich. You just need to be smart about what you're spending your money on and be thrifty.
Yeah.
Like that's the truth. So that's what I would say, is start there. Then you need to do a time study. Figure out, where's your time going. I talked to so many pastors who are like, yeah, I spent 35 hours this week working on sermon prep. I'm like, you sat in your office for 35 hours working on a sermon? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Right?
I had that same conversation with pastors, bro. Same thing.
Yeah, that's a waste of time. Like, let's optimize this. You need to improve your process, find a coach, and optimize your pastoral time so you're not wasting God's time, because you need to be in front of people. That's where we need to be, is in front of people. Yeah. And then find something. It's okay to apply to 6, 7 different things, work at one of them for 4 months, 6 months, and go, you know what? I don't like this. Right? That's perfectly fine to try stuff, even at age 50.
Yep. Good stuff, man. Well, hey, if someone wanted to connect with you, other than purchasing your book, what's a great way for someone to find you, either on social media or email? How does someone reach out to you, Danny?
Facebook is a really good one. I'm pretty active on Facebook, Danny Holwerda Jr. You can find me on there. I've also got pastor.dan at Instagram. Like, I'm pretty easy to find in the social media realm. If you see a white dude, that's my father. He's a great guy, but he won't know what you're talking about if you message to him. I'm a mocha colored fella. You might not be able to see that, and that's okay. Good. My email is also open to anyone, right? Dan, DAN at Nexus Church, and then MN. So M as in Mike, N as in Nathan.com. So nexuschurchmn.com. That'll go right to me. And I don't mind sitting and just chatting and conversation and loving with people. I don't have any fee or consulting thing with me. I do some business consulting on the side. We haven't even talked about that. but if you want to talk and you're hurting, man, I love you, brother. I love you, sister. I absolutely want to help.
Awesome.
That'd be part 2, John. That'd be the next follow-up
next time
I'm
podcast.
we
going to
have
need your
John,
help
we'll
on getting the
Because
consultants.
there's more coming. I promise you there's more coming.
Come on.
Well, literally at the day of this recording was your first day of just checking out our business builders community. So in all seriousness, this is what we do, man. We help people launch their thing. So if that's the thing you're wanting to get out into the world, we believe we can help you do that.
We can
And I'm
definitely
not saying
provide
that so
some
much.
accountability.
Yeah,
Perfect.
absolutely.
I
I'm not
need
saying
the
that so much for
lessons.
you, Danny, as I'm saying it for other people, listening to this, to recognize that's a huge part of this, man. Get in a community that supports you, encourages you, and celebrates the progress you're making.
We got our first worship leader from being out in the community. It was someone
There
just
you
me
go.
working at this gym, was one of my personal trainers. They were with us for 2 years. Our first
How about
worship
that?
leader, just from
Wow.
being in the community. It's worth it.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Absolutely. Well, Danny, thank you so much for your time, man. It's been fun hanging out with you on the podcast, and we're grateful for the value that you're bringing today. So all the best to you, brother.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you,
you. I've
man.
got some more weightlifting to do and just got to love on more people. So
Amen.
All right.
Well, hey, thanks for watching this episode of the EntrePastors Podcast. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can be notified every time we release a new episode. If you'd like to get connected to other pastors who are learning to think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs, then we invite you to check us out on Facebook. Just search for the EntrePastors Connect group, answer a few of our simple questions there, and we'd love to include you in the conversations. And if you're really ready to go to the next level, then we invite you to join our EntrePastors membership community. When you become a monthly subscriber, you will receive access to courses, exclusive community, and coaching that will help you along in your own EntrePastors journey. If there's anything else we can do to serve you, please visit us at entrepastors.com, and we will do our best to serve you there. God bless everybody. See you soon.